I am so excited for today, and welcome guests for being here live. And for those of you who are watching a little bit later on, we are excited that you are here. The content of today is we talk about using our power, our sense of power in ways that really move conversations forward in our business, using our sense of power in relationships is the topic for today. And Jessica DeLeon is going to join us, and we're going to have this conversation with you listening in. And I'm just super excited about it. Jessica, welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is just so delightful. We've been talking about this for a while, and just to have this happen today before you leave for a trip and when I'm coming back for a trip, and I know that you had a phenomenal weekend, and super excited about you being here, and just would love for you to start with sharing a little bit about your path. What got you to the place now that you are a hugely successful businesswoman? How did you get to this place, Jessica?
Well, it's so interesting to be called that. I really, the businesswoman title is something that I'm learning to really embody. It's easy for me to call myself a counselor. It's easy to be a wife and, a family member and a friend and a sister. And the businesswoman thing is, I think all of us who are really passionate about what we do as a service to the community, so there's sometimes this challenge as far as making it into a business. And so for me, my offering as a counselor has really just come through my own experience of, going through spiritual crisis and being funneled through the psychiatric system and, having that experience of being diagnosed and then prescribed medication and then getting worse and worse and worse after. And so it was really just out of survival. I had to learn different ways of balancing myself and finding internal harmony emotionally, mentally, physically. And that's how I found Reiki and all these different integrative and holistic healing modalities that I've learned over the years, just so that I could keep myself healthy and balanced and then from there, as things unfold, people start to ask for help on their path as well. And so that's really how my counseling practice flourished. It was because it was needed. And it is the greatest privilege to be able to serve my community in this way. And I really see my practice as my ministry. So it is challenging for me to see it as a business, and that's something that I'm stepping into because we all need to be compensated for our time, and but I would do it for free. That's the best thing to say.
You light up every time you talk about what you are passionate about and what you're working on. I know that you came from the financial industry, and so you know what successful portfolios look like. I know that your family has had businesses in real estate. And so again, knowing what those kinds of portfolios and so in this space with this being very, very heart-centered, how does this look different than the financial or the real estate type of business?
That's interesting. So I went to school to be a teacher, and like an elementary school teacher, and I graduated from the university right when the housing market crashed. So my first steps into independence and adulthood and being employed was watching all of the adults in the world going through this financial crisis. And so luckily I was able to get hired as a behavior therapist. And then from there, wanted to make more money and made that transition into working in finance. And looking back, I see it as like a really important training in my life because, looking at different generations, I mean, if I look at my grandmother's generation, it was natural for women to have no idea what was going on with their household finances and to just focus on taking care of babies and rearing children and doing the very sacred, important work of housekeeping. And had I not gone into finance, I don't think I would have ever really learned about estate planning and learning about the importance of planning for your legacy. And I think, yeah, it was an incredibly important experience, and it is not my passion. So the thing that I loved about working in finance was the counseling aspect of it. I mean, people talking about money is a highly activating conversation for people. It brings up their biggest fears. And I've always been very skilled at navigating, sensitive, emotional, content. And so that was a part that I always loved. I went from working with the special needs demographic. And so a lot of the families that I worked with putting together their financial plan had children with special needs. And so talking about that delicate conversation about, what happens when the parents, pass on and they have this child who's going to need care for the rest of their life. And so, I really prided myself on being able to have those difficult conversations. But when it came to the minutia of calculating income and things like that, I just wanted to pull my teeth out. So that was part of starting my counseling practice, was really because I was like, I just don't love doing this. I love sitting with people and having these, really intimate conversations, but I don't want to do it in the container of the financial plan. That's not really the meat. The meat of it is I want to talk about what are your greatest fears? What is weighing on your heart? And so I had to have that kind of come to Jesus moment of like, this is really what I want to be doing with the rest of my life.
And I really love how you came from the day job space and having gone to school and having been educated, and then realizing in those spaces that what you'd been putting your effort and intentions into wasn't exactly what you wanted to be doing, and that you began to navigate that. And you went back to school to get the degree that you have in order to be able to facilitate deep conversations. And I have watched you do this with groups of people. And I can only imagine how skillful you are one-on-one in that process. When you are talking with people about their greatest, deepest fears, whether those happen to be financial or something else, in those processes, how are you able to keep your own power for yourself as you allow them the space to kind of move around inside of what they are thinking? Because oftentimes when people begin to talk about things that they are very afraid of, it's not a direct one-to-one line of, this is what I'm afraid of, let me tell you about it. There's often this navigating of walking through and helping them to discover and helping them to find the words to be able to go in these corners of their feelings and begin to suss them out, so to speak? How do you hold your power as you are empowering other people in those conversations, Jess?
That's an excellent question. So I have to just give reverence to my teachers, Ron and Mary Hulnick. So they are the professors and founders of the University of Santa Monica, where I did my spiritual psychology training. And so through their methodology of spiritual psychology, there's a modality of facilitating somebody. And so this is not coaching. It's different. It's having the understanding that there are things that have happened to us in the past, and then there is the perception or the story that we create about those events. And we have the power to shift that perception. And so a spiritual psychology, facilitation is very client-centered. So my job is to ask the right questions, because I know that the person sitting, in front of me, they are the keepers of their deepest level of healing and wisdom. So it's not, I do my best to not get into advice giving. I know that my job is to gently guide them into their own inner wisdom.
And as they are moving through those places, again, I've watched you do this so skillfully with groups of people. And then when we were working with Katie Ingersoll, watching you in those spaces as well, just being able to ask people questions and hold that space in such a way that you were very, very present. The person didn't feel alone. They didn't feel isolated. They didn't feel that you had this ability to help them ground or feel like they were connecting in a way that was new, that might be a little bit uncomfortable and perhaps very uncomfortable. And yet you had this very clear vision of this is where we are. And somehow through the conversation, we're going to navigate this in order to get to a place where the client understands better, or the person understands better what it is that they are afraid of. Because once we find those things that we're afraid of, there seems to be this ability to say, I'm going to deal with it or I'm not, but at least I know what it is, right?
Yeah.
So in those spaces, how have you, and maybe I'm coming back to the question again, yes, you had those teachers who taught you different ways of doing things, but are there things that you do ahead of time, Jessica, that help you to stay in your space fully empowered and stay in the moment?
Yeah, so prior to any counseling session, I always do a prayer and a grounding. So, I ask Spirit to use me as a vessel for the deepest level of healing possible for, and then whoever I'm sitting with. And the principles that are taught in spiritual psychology, one of the first principles is heart-centered listening. So it's sitting across from somebody, listening deeply, not with my mind necessarily, with my heart. And this is a skill that can be taught. And, I'm an empath. And so, when someone is speaking to me, I am, acutely aware of the energetics behind every word. I'm witnessing the body language, the vibration, the tonality, all of it has profound meaning to me. And so, the things that in the past were probably challenging to some of my family members and friends, that my natural capacity to smell bullshit, for lack of a better word, when somebody's not saying their truth, like I just can feel it. I don't know why I am that way, but that's the truth. And I know that that's been challenging for some of my loved ones, because my father was actually the one who reflected back to me. He said, Jessica, you make people feel things that they don't want to feel. And so that was, being a counselor, like there's an agreement that we're going to do this work together, and I'm going to gently and lovingly guide you into the things that feel uncomfortable. But for somebody who doesn't want to feel those things, I can be a challenging person to be around. But, as far as like maintaining my container and my energy, this has been a learning experience. Like when I first started my practice, there were times where I would get sick because of not properly, maintaining boundaries and clearing myself and grounding myself before and after session. So, the greatest training is life. And,
True.
my clients have been the ones that have really just iron sharpening iron. Like I get better with every new person that I sit with, because everybody is so unique. But I have, over years of doing this, really developed like my own protocol so that I'm keeping myself really well. And
Yes.
I have seen, and I've, this is kind of like maybe a belief that a lot of people hold around counselors or healers or, practitioners, is that they drain themselves, and they give so much of their essence to the people that they work with, to the point of personal detriment. And so I'm not subscribing to that. My part of my prayer as well before every session is that I'm being cleansed and healed and renewed in every session as well. So it's not me, Jessica, giving my energy to somebody else. It's me, Jessica, being a vessel for the divine to move through me.
Oh, that is such an incredible place for us to take just a quick break while people chew on that, because that is just so good. The being the vessel for the divine to move through. And in that, I would say being healed at the same time for myself, and then being empowered in that. And that you're right, people don't need to be getting sick as a result of working with other people. We will be right back to continue this conversation. We are back, and I just want to share with you how powerful this first segment has been for me. That process of thinking about how we come into conversation, how we prepare ourselves before we come into our businesses, and this space as entrepreneurs. What we are doing, so many people are entrepreneurs in this particular space and time for themselves, by themselves, right? And so taking that time to reflect and to create patterns, create ways that you are able to be taking care of yourself and doing things that you know are helpful for you in that process. One of the energetic tools that I use is to be able to ground myself. And for me, grounding myself can be several different things. First thing in the morning, I spend some quiet time. That helps me ground into the day. I also work on having moments of gratitude throughout the day. And that's just a practice that I have. Again, that brings me into my own experience. Then I have discovered more recently, I know, some of you have known this for years already, but I have found that for myself, using my five senses and using the ones that I'm not using as frequently help bring me back into the moment. And so I'm going to bring Jessica back in. And what we're talking about today is incredible abilities to be able to be present, to use our own power, to not be overpowering to other people, to live that balance, and yet to be strong in business, to be strong, showing up strongly for ourselves and for other people. Jessica, I would go ahead and get your Instagram up. I would really encourage people to follow jessica.lionheart on Instagram. You will find so much amazing content. And one of the things that I have noticed that you have talked about has been gene keys. And for me, this opened up a whole new level of power that helped me to start seeing things a little bit differently. I would love for you to share about gene keys, please.
So the gene keys was anchored into being through Richard Rudd. And he was a lifetime student of human design, and then the I Ching. So the I Ching is an ancient Eastern form of astrology. And what the Gene Keys is really, the first time that you sit with your profile, it's like somebody handing you your karma, your dharma. Like, here's the curriculum of what you are here to learn and experience and manifest here on the planet in this lifetime. And so for me, it has been one of the most powerful tools of self-realization. And it's really remarkable how when somebody, just kind of gives you the framework of how to use this stream of wisdom. I mean, this can be a very illuminating, it can be very intense to see this information about yourself in this way, because it's so spot on. It's shocking. It's shocking. And it's a lifelong contemplation. So it's something that I don't tell people to get into, willy-nilly. Like, it's something that you want to have a lot of you want to have space for. You want to have somebody, perhaps guiding you through it, because it can be, and it's intended to be, very activating. I mean, there's literally a genetic component to sitting with this information. It unlocks, dormant coding inside of you. So it's transformational.
It is transformational. And I know that when you shared in front of a whole group of people, and I got to be there, you looked at me towards the end and said, Sarah, share a little bit. So I, pulled my paper out and shared a little bit. And you said, you're a teacher. And Jessica had been teaching literally my entire life. It's just been when we were living overseas, I was teaching piano lessons privately. When we went back to the States, I was teaching. I'm a credentialed teacher. I've been doing it for 35 years, right? But yet for you to look at me and say, Sarah, you are a teacher, it was like, really? You see that in me? This wasn't an accident that I chose these paths over and over and over again, because there was a calling in my heart. This was the right place, the right thing to go forward with. But yet there was also this, I come from a family of serious scientists, and I'm just not that. I don't do the white lab coat for hours sitting in a corner well. I just don't. And so the classroom has been, and I teach science, I have at different points, and have loved every moment of it, and watching people's expression when they get to see through a microscope and see things that are smaller, or look out into the galaxy and see things that are far away. I love that. It's so incredible. But yet, still, in your presence, you said, Sarah, you're a teacher. I was like, whoop, somebody sees me. And so I agree with you. Do not go looking into the Gene Keys unless you are really ready to start having some conversations with yourself about where you are and what it is that you are most enjoying. And if Gene Keys isn't your way, there's a lot of other paths that are out there that you can go find out more about yourself. But I have really appreciated how you are able to take Gene Keys and have conversations with people at a very, very easy level, and willing to go deeper, but also then to be in a lower place.
But one of the things that's really fascinating about the Gene Keys is that it is this marriage of science and spirituality. And so it's fascinating to me, like you and your family and being, these family members that are scientists. Well, you're a spiritual scientist. Like, for us to be Reiki masters, I mean, we're working with quantum physics. So it's not separate. And that's what's so fascinating about being alive during this time, is that spirituality and science are not separate. And science is proving the existence of the divine. I mean, it's an amazing time to be alive, honestly. I'm really glad that I incarnated during this time.
It is a great time to be alive. As you are talking with people and sharing with them and using tools like Gene Keys, what is it that helps them in that place to be able to say, you know what, I want to know more about myself? Is that just something that they are naturally wanting before they start a conversation with you? Or can somebody just come to you and say, I've been working on some different things, and the pieces are just aren't falling together, and would love for them to fall together in a different way? What are your clients like often?
I mean, I think that there is a universal human experience of suffering. And so whether that's, having difficult relationships, I have, plenty of people that come to me for couples counseling because they're starting to recognize a pattern in their life of the people that they're in partnership with. Or people who had a similar experience to me where they had a very violent spiritual awakening and, conventional Western therapy was not helpful. So I feel like I have a full spectrum of different types of people that work with me, but I think that all of us get to starting to do this inner work because of the suffering that we've gone through, and it shows up in different ways for each of us. But that is a universal human experience, is the pain and being able, it requires courage to sit with your pain and your fear, so to all of us who are doing this work, God bless you, because it can be incredibly scary and uncomfortable. And what's great is the more that you do this work, it does begin to become more manageable. It's not that, life events stop happening. Like, we're all going to lose loved ones. There's, disease, divorce, there's all these things that we go through as human beings, but the way in which we relate to what's happening is something that we can shift. And that's through, different modalities like spiritual psychology, the gene keys, sitting with plant medicines, whatever it is, there's all these different avenues to having self-awareness.
Jessica, you're absolutely spot on with that. One of the things that I would just share with people is that for me in this process, when I really began to not just look at my family of origin and the incredible structure that I had gotten from them and education and living in the jungle as a child, that whole incredible upbringing. When I began to look at my own suffering and began to look at what was driving for me, what I was wanting to numb out, however, through sleep or whatever, that's the point that I began to feel untethered. And I wasn't expecting that. And I really appreciated that there were people who were around me who could begin to see that I was acting in ways that were not necessarily like me as I began exploring what it could look like to no longer carry the weight of the suffering. And so in that space, know that having people around you, someone that you can reach out to for conversations, you don't have to be in person, but to know that you're not alone in that process, I think is one of the greatest gifts that a spiritual counselor, somebody can give you along the way, whatever that group is that you have of support people. And to know that it's okay to lean on others because, they may come lean on you at some point. And that's okay. All those processes those are all okay. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And Jessica, if you are willing, I would love for you to share more about your experience that was such what you call a violent spiritual awakening. If you are willing to share a little bit about that, I think that would be really helpful for some of our listeners, because I know that's been super helpful for me. So we will be back. Stay tuned, friends.
Life is so fragile, and we're constantly reminded just how fragile life can be, especially when we or a loved one is told we have cancer. Cancer survivor myself, I can tell you, we still feel very alone in this journey.
There's a study that's been showing that patients who are socially isolated have a worse prognosis, have a worse outcome than patients who are socially interconnected.
Modalities for Life is a non-profit cancer support group for those whose life has been impacted by cancer. Humor, hope, heart, and hugs.
Humor, hope, heart, hugs, and a whole lot of love.
Share this with your friends and family and support this community in every way you can. No one should face cancer alone.
I am a chemo buddy for life.
We are a buddies network.
No one does cancer alone.
Be a buddy.
And we are all here for you as a community of love.
We are chemo buddies for life.
And if you've heard 3 words, you have cancer, for yourself or someone else, you belong with us at Chemo Buddies for Life.
Healing through connections.
We are talking with Jessica DeLeon, who is going to be sharing next with us about her own spiritual awakening. And I have to tell you that this has really helped me because in my own family, we've had some mental challenges. And in those spaces, came to understand that there was a chemical imbalance that was taking place. And once that began to be addressed through, yes, Western medicine, there began to be a real difference in the amount of chaos, if I can use that word, that was taking place in the family. However, I realize that that's not everybody's story. So in this, she has helped me to see things from such a different place. And so I'm going to bring Jessica back in and just let her share her story, let her share how much she wants to of that. And Jessica, I'm going to take myself off the screen and just let you share, friend.
So my life took a very big turn of events in 2014. I was really unhappy in my financial services profession, in life in general. I just felt incredibly lost and unfulfilled, and started experiencing anxiety and depression pretty profoundly for the first time in my life. And it was a colleague of mine who noticed that I was really unhappy, and she invited me to join her in what was kind of shared as like a self-realization, self-help weekend at this organization called Landmark. And so out of desperation, I joined her, and this container, this organization, they there's plenty of people out there who would say that this is like the best experience and the most important experience of their life. And it was for me in the fact that it was life-changing, life-altering. And so the weekend workshop really consists of different practices that are really intended to break you down and build you up. And so I did the Landmark Forum, and then I did their advanced forum back to back. And at the time I was working in finance, I was a heavy smoker. And this program completely shifted my viewpoint of reality. And so I went vegan, I quit smoking, I got baptized. And looking back at that situation, I realized that what I was experiencing was probably, my third eye opening for the first time in my life. But the way that it manifested was a psychotic episode. And so for about 3 to 4 days, I stopped sleeping, and my family really was clued into the fact that something wasn't right with me, and had me evaluated, and it was recommended that my family do a 5150 on me. So I was placed on a psychiatric hold at a local mental health facility, and that was there was like Jessica before this experience, and then Jessica after. And so if you know anybody who's been placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold, I went to a private hospital, so I had, a better experience than somebody who would have been, the public hospitals. Or I've heard horrible stories about what happens in the public psych wards. But needless to say, it was a traumatizing experience for me. When somebody is placed on a psychiatric hold, if you are above 18 years old, you're considered an adult, and so your family has very little say in the treatment protocols and the medication. When you have contact, all of that is very, very heavily guarded, essentially. So, I tried to escape the first night that I was there, and it took, several staff member to hold me down and inject me with the sedative. So I had the full girl interrupted experience. And being in the psych ward, I realized pretty quickly that I had to comply with their treatment protocol in order to be released. So I was placed on, a cocktail of pharmaceutical drugs. And after 4 days, I was released into my parents' care and fell into a deep depression. I was, really ashamed and felt guilty about putting my family through this experience. And I was on all of these, psychotropic drugs. So, the first couple of days getting out of the hospital, I was completely numb. Which, after a week or two of that, I started to get really, really nervous. I started to understand why people would take their lives, because I felt so disembodied. Like I didn't feel bad, but I definitely didn't feel good. And my experience was going back to the psychiatrist and them, just kind of throwing darts. Well, we'll take you off the Wellbutrin, we'll put you on this, and we'll do a higher, and we'll do a lower dosage. And looking back, there was never like a full kind of workup on, how my hormones and my, if I had parasites or, my digestive health, like all of these things greatly impact our cognitive and behavioral experience. What I've learned through having this experience, I know that, if somebody has a vitamin D deficiency, that they could exhibit signs of severe depression. If somebody has parasites in their gut, they can have psychotic episodes because of that. And so, this is something that I think it's important to speak to, is that my experience is that the psychiatric system really has not evolved for decades. And so I think my feeling is that most conventional psych wards are working in a really barbaric kind of way. And so that has been, part of my mission is to learn all of these different integrative and healing, holistic healing modalities that are, very prevalent and have been for eons in the East, like the understanding that there's, a chakra system and meridian lines and the importance of nutrition and, in Ayurveda, your different doshas. And I think that Western medicine has its place when it comes to crisis situations. In my case, I hadn't slept for 4 or 5 nights, and you better believe that I needed some form of very powerful medication to knock me out. And that cannot be the long-term approach to mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. And so, my experience is that learning different forms of indigenous wisdom. If I were to be in a village and I had a psychotic episode, the local medicine man or shaman or medicine woman, they would know that that was an indication that I am the next generation of healer. And so there's this concept of shamanic illness that I learned after my episode that to me was like the only explanation that made sense for what I had experienced. There was a profound shift in my awareness. And, in that time being in a psychotic episode, now having worked with plant medicines, I realized that I was having, a shamanic experience. And so I feel it's really important for us, as a community to start having conversations about like, what is the difference between somebody who's schizophrenic and somebody who's clairvoyant? There's plenty of indigenous practitioners, medicine people who would say that somebody who's experiencing this form of an altered state, that there is absolutely 100% a spiritual and energetic component to what they're experiencing. And so, I'm not saying that Western medicine doesn't have its place, but I think that all aspects of a person need to be taken into consideration when we're looking at any form of healing, whether it's, a physical injury, grief, having cognitive challenges. There's just so much wisdom when it comes to all these different holistic and integrative healing modalities that I hope that the psychiatric system will really start to take seriously.
Oh, Jessica, I so appreciate you sharing your story, because I know that it's going to be helpful for other people to start looking at and considering different pathways. And you're right, maybe Western medicine needs to be supportive in some way, but there are so many other things that are taking place inside the person's body. It can be so helpful for someone to have a bigger picture of, at least for family members, to be looking at all the different pictures, all the different pieces. And I just really appreciate you taking the time and sharing so deeply from your heart. When you talk about it being a spiritual awakening, how long was it from the point that you were in to the point that that you had people speaking into your life, and that you began to understand that there was a network that was already there that you could access and find out more information about the spiritual awakening?
So I had my episode in November of 2014, and then I was doing an outpatient program where it was like a group of us would get together and they would do group counseling. And I was sharing with the group about my experience, and this woman who I had never spoken to, I don't even know what her name is, I never talked to her again, but it was just like divine intervention. She looks at me and she says, "Jessica, you're an empath." Like, very nonchalant, matter of fact. And I had never heard that word before. I didn't know what that meant, but my whole body lit up. And I went home and I researched it, and there it describes what it's like to be a highly sensitive person. Somebody who can feel the emotions of other people, somebody who, is highly attuned to energy. And so that was the first time that I saw my experience not through the lens of being mentally ill and having, something wrong with me, but the fact that perhaps I'm actually, very sensitive and spiritually gifted. And there was just this whole new world that opened up to me. And the only person that I knew that I could talk to from this perspective was my colleague. At the time, her aunt was a Reiki master. And so I reached out to her and through hysterical sobs told her about my experience. And she took me under her wing and taught me the language of energy. And from there, I just threw myself into learning as many different healing modalities as possible. And it's just fascinating how these moments in our lives where we're on this track and we have this paradigm of this is my reality and this is how I see the world. And then somebody says one word and it just completely opens up to this whole new reality. And it continues to happen to me. Just when I think okay, I've really gotten things figured out here in this human life, then something will happen. It's it's a whole new world.
Oh, absolutely. I had this experience over the weekend where I had seen a picture of the Serpent of Light on Chichen Itza, and it happens a couple different times a year. So I see this picture a month ago, and something inside of my being just leaps forward and says, I've got to be there. I've got to see it. Mm-hmm. So do the trip, do all of the things. And yes, at the right time on the right day, the sun is shining, but we don't get to see the Serpent of Light because there's a massive storm that's coming in. Mm-hmm. Now it's happening. Mm-hmm. All of the things are correct, but none of us are seeing it, right? The professional photographers are there, all of it. Mm-hmm. And again, it just brought me back to a place of spirit speaks to me in ways I understand, but sometimes it's about the bigger picture, the other things that took place on the trip, the conversations, the being there for several different firsts for people. And I will never forget those, right? And so even though I was at the right place at the right time to see this incredible thing that happens, it wasn't to be. But yet the trip was magical. There was just so much in there. And so again, having the opportunity to see through new eyes and allow life to be my teacher. Yeah. And I just so deeply appreciated that new understanding, that new knowingness. And then to be able to really listen when the whole body lights up and says, ooh, to follow that, to see what that's about, to get information on what that happens to be about. We're going to get a quick commercial break. We will be right back with Jessica DeLeon. We are back and we are talking with Jessica DeLeon, who's been sharing with us so much profound information about being able to balance ourselves when we are getting ready to work with different people, about being able to be vessels and to be healed during that process of being a vessel, and to not feel like just because you're heart-centered that you have to go through periods of being sick as a result of working with people. And then also this concept of being able to be present and to set boundaries in such a way that we're able to be present for others, learn methodologies of asking questions in order to help lead the person that we're working with into a different place, for them to be able to process information, for us to be able to be there. She's also shared very, very deeply part of her own story about her own awakening. And I'm just so grateful that she's done that. As we come back in together, I would love, Jessica, for you to share, please, what is the most important thing that you want people to hear or that you want to reiterate so that they really hear it out of our time together? I want to make sure we have plenty of time to cover that.
I think that what is part of my mission, and what feels very, tender to me, is that if you've had an event happen in your life, whether it's similar to what I experienced in having a psychotic episode, or it's making a mistake, maybe you were incarcerated, or you had an affair, or these things that are like the unforgivable things in our lives. I would offer that event, whatever it was divinely orchestrated. And that when you can process and transmute and heal and move through that experience and everything that came forward from having that experience, when you have the courage to ask for help and to get the support, that is medicine for so many other people too. For your family members and friends who witness your journey, it is incredibly inspiring. And then there's other people like you who have gone through, a very difficult event in their life, thinking that they'll never be able to come out of this. But then they hear your story, and it provides them hope. That this is why I share openly about my experience, because I want somebody, if it's just one person out there who has been through something that they think, I can't come back from this, that is a lie. The truth is that the divine has used you so that you can be a beacon of light in the darkest places of humanity, and everything is forgivable, in my opinion. I just think that it's so important for us as a community to have these conversations about the things that are the most difficult, because going back to like the kind of the village and the tribe, is when somebody was shunned from the tribe or excommunicated, that was a death sentence. And
yes, it was.
Currently in our Western society, the protocol and the procedure, when somebody messes up, whether it's addiction or incarceration or having a psychotic episode, the protocol is to send people away. You get sent to rehab, you get sent to prison, you get sent to the psych ward, and you're separated from your community, you're separated from your family. And I would argue that is an outdated approach. I think that, I really believe in the principles of Ubuntu and this ancient African wisdom, that we are only as healthy as the sickest member of our tribe. And so, if there's somebody in your family who is struggling, or someone in your community that, is suffering, it's difficult, because then people need to ask for help. And I'm a huge, proponent of that. So if somebody is not asking for help, we can't have these codependent kind of dynamics. You really have to be mindful of that. And as Reiki masters, as women of faith, we know the power of prayer. Yes. And so if there's somebody in your family who's struggling, visualize them radiating health and well-being. Pray words of healing over them daily. And I know in every fiber of my being that is incredibly powerful. And so no one is hopeless. Everybody, redemption. Everybody has an opportunity to turn anything around in their life, and to let that story be incredibly powerful medicine for the people who bear witness to your journey.
Jessica, I love that you speak with such clarity. I completely agree with this concept of, yes, people need to be asking for help, but yet I remember that when my family member was really struggling, that there were feelings of shame for me, and that I wasn't the one who was in the center of the circle. However, I was one who was feeling, and that there needed to be, for me, also healing. So it's not just for the person who's in the center of the circle, it's for the entire tribe that also needs to have that healing that's available. But my only way to heal, I mean, I literally moved across the country to get away from it all, because I just thought, not going to do another day of this. This is crazy making. And yet, I have found that being in community with my family has been the place of the deepest healing. And so I left, but yet that wasn't, you can physically move, but you also don't necessarily emotionally remove when you do that. And that place of healing has been so profoundly deep for me. And as we continue to move around the country, all of us kiddos, and my mom is still living, to watch that there continues to be these levels of healing for each of us as we continue to navigate family kinds of things. And so I think in some ways our family container is one of the places that we get to do some of the deepest work, if we're willing, at least in my case, to show up to do that work.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the modalities that I really it continues to just blow my mind is family constellations, which is also based in ancient African wisdom, but it's seeing the family tree and seeing these karmic contracts and these dynamics and these patterns of wounding that happen, generation after generation. And circling back to psychotic episodes, there's this understanding in family constellations that a psychotic episode is really pressure building up in the family tree of unprocessed trauma or dysfunction, and that the most sensitive family member in the tree will that pressure will explode through them. And
yes.
So I've witnessed this over time and time again, because people reach out to me when they have a family member in crisis, that this is not an isolated situation, that this is symptomatic of a sick family tree.
Right. Yes. And I know that was really true for lots of different reasons and different layers in my own extended family. And to be able to come to those places of having, can we start to have conversations? And that becomes a conversation for maybe one person in the family, maybe two or three, and maybe for a larger group as well. I so appreciated this conversation with you. I love that you were able to take what other people would say, never talk about, and that you just say, here I am, let me share, because it's going to help somebody. You have such power, and I am just so grateful that our lives are parallel. They've been crossing over, and all things that we've been doing together the last several years have just been so powerful. So Jessica, great to see you. Thank you for this time. And we will see you at some other point on another. You'll be back. We have more conversations.
Just say the word. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all the beautiful service that you provide to our community. It's just really, really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And so, friends, I just want to share, just here at the very end of our time together, some of the pieces that for me come forward as I talk with Jessica. One is the space of, we don't need to live in a place of small. We can take the gifts that we have and begin to find tools, energetic tools, I might say, that help us to be able to take the personality that we have, the quirkiness that I have. All of these different pieces can come together and work for us in strength for us, even if we feel different from our family members, even if we have family members who are super, super strong, a whole bunch of them in one area, and we feel like maybe we don't have that same love and desire, that's completely fine. The other piece that comes forward for me as I think about empowering and having our own power as business people is this idea that we can come from great education, and we can come from experiences and be picking up the pieces inside of that just make our heart open. And if we're listening internally, yes, there is such a thing as the golden handcuffs. I get it. But if we can be listening internally to what's taking place and find those gifts that we just can share with other people in a way that we feel fulfilled, but also that we are of service to other people, I think that there is great strength inside of that. Thank you for being here for this episode of Simply Sarah. We will see you next time.
Thank you.